Have you ever felt like you have these massive dreams, but your daily actions just totally don't match up?
Oh, constantly. Yeah.
Right. Like, if you were being brutally honest with yourself, is there this Grand Canyon-sized gap between the incredible vision you have for your life and what you actually end up doing on, like, a random Tuesday morning?
It is a profoundly uncomfortable question to sit with. I mean, mostly because answering it honestly requires us to confront our own hypocrisy.
Yeah, which is not fun.
No, not at all. We all prefer the comfort of our potential over the friction of our actual reality.
Exactly, which is really the core tension we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We are exploring a fascinating allegorical text titled The Harvest of Action, Defeating the Seed of Procrastination.
Such a rich text.
It really is. And our mission today is to break down this narrative about ambition, the actual mechanics of discipline, and, the fields we choose to cultivate in our own lives.
Yeah, and the story starts by holding up this mirror that might look a little too familiar to anyone listening, honestly.
Oh, for sure. We meet our protagonist, Samuel. So Samuel is 26 years old. He's healthy. He's highly intelligent and just absolutely brimming with vision.
Right, he's the guy with all the ideas.
Exactly. He lives in the small agrarian town that's surrounded by incredibly fertile land. And Samuel has this grand dream that he broadcasts to literally anyone who will listen.
He loves an audience.
He does. He paints this picture of the future, promising that one day he will have the most productive farm in the entire region. He insists people will travel to seek his advice and, he's going to be this massive pillar of the community.
And the social dynamics at play here early in the narrative are just critical, because the text deliberately emphasizes that everyone around Samuel really admired his eloquence.
Yeah, he's a talker.
He has a distinct gift for articulation. I mean, he describes his future harvest with such vivid sensory clarity that the townspeople can almost taste the crops.
Wow.
Right? He creates this social feedback loop where he's rewarded with awe and respect simply for his ability to describe a hypothetical future.
So he's getting all the credit before doing any of the work. He's persuasive, he's charismatic, but then, and this is where it shifts, the narrative just drops the floor out from under him.
You really does.
Because the reality of Samuel's life is this stark contrast to his speeches. His actual field is completely, utterly empty.
Just dirt.
Yeah, just dirt. While his neighbors are waking up hours before sunrise, breaking their backs, sweating through the midday heat to cultivate their land, Samuel is sleeping in.
Of course he is.
Right. And he spends his afternoons sitting in the shade. And his justification is so fascinating to me. He claims he is just planning a strategy, waiting for the quote-unquote right moment to begin.
Oh, at the right moment.
Yeah. While all this fertile land just sits dormant, he is merely conceptualizing.
Well, that phrase, waiting for the right moment, is perhaps the most sophisticated camouflage for inaction that human beings have ever invented.
That is so true.
I mean, it allows Samuel to feel as though he's actively engaging with his work.
Yeah.
In his own mind, he isn't being lazy, right? He's strategizing. He's optimizing.
He feels productive.
Exactly. But the physical world doesn't care about internal optimization. The soil is completely indifferent to his brilliant strategies. It only responds to the physical disruption of a shovel.
The soil is indifferent. I love that. And if the soil is indifferent, Samuel's grandfather is basically the human embodiment of that reality.
Absolutely.
The grandfather enters the story as the ultimate catalyst, and he is the polar opposite of Samuel. I mean, he's a man of incredibly few words, but deep, undeniable history.
He's a doer, not a talker.
Right. He built everything he owns with his own two hands through decades of quiet, invisible, consistent work. He never talks about what he plans to do. He just possesses the undeniable results of having already done it.
And when the grandfather arrives and, surveys Samuel's barren field, his reaction is really instructive.
Yeah, he doesn't yell at him or anything.
No, he doesn't launch into some moralistic lecture about work ethic. He merely observes the raw potential of this abandoned soil. Then, in a highly symbolic gesture, he reaches into his pocket and hands his grandson 2 small envelopes.
Okay, so he tells Samuel that inside each envelope is a seed meant for the exact same soil, but with entirely different biological programming.
Right.
The first one is the seed of discipline. And the grandfather's description of the seed strips away any romanticism whatsoever.
It sounds awful, honestly.
It kind of does. He explains that if you plant it, it will demand your attention every single day. It grows agonizingly slowly. It requires you to show up, particularly on the days when you are just exhausted and unmotivated.
Which is most days.
Exactly. But the ultimate payoff is exponential. Over time, it matures into a massive tree that will yield fruit for decades.
Yeah, it's basically the physical manifestation of delayed gratification.
Right.
It requires you to sacrifice your present comfort for a future reward. But then, the second envelope introduces the antagonist of the story, which is the seed of procrastination.
The easy seed.
Right. And the grandfather explains that the mechanics of this seed are just insidious. It requires absolute zero effort, zero water, zero sunlight management.
It just goes.
It grows completely on its own, rapidly and aggressively. But wherever it takes root, it actively suffocates everything else in its proximity. It steals the space, the nutrients, and the potential meant for a real harvest, leaving behind nothing but an overgrown wasteland.
So Samuel listens to this breakdown, he smiles confidently, and instantly says, "Grandfather, the choice is obvious. I will plant the seed of discipline."
Of course he says that.
Right, but I actually have to push back on the text's framing here for a second.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because isn't visualizing and verbalizing your goals exactly what modern psychology tells us to do? Like creating external accountability, visualizing success.
Well, yes, Sam.
It just feels like modern productivity advice. Like someone who buys the best gym clothes, downloads all the fitness apps, talks about their routine to all their friends, but never actually lifts a weight. Why is the grandfather treating Samuel's vocalized ambition as a negative trait?
That is a crucial distinction to make, because modern psychology supports visualizing the process.
Okay, the process.
Right? Mentally rehearsing the steps you need to take to overcome obstacles. But Samuel isn't visualizing the process of pulling weeds or tilling soil.
Yeah.
He's visualizing the outcome.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
He is simulating the reward of being this wealthy, respected farmer. And when we vividly describe our desired outcomes to others, and we receive that positive social validation you mentioned earlier, our brains actually release a surge of dopamine.
Wait, so it's a biological loophole? We get the neurological reward of the harvest without ever even picking up a shovel.
Precisely. The brain actually struggles to distinguish between the vocalized intention to do something and the physical execution of the act itself.
That is wild.
Especially when society rewards the intention. But this is exactly why the grandfather's response to Samuel's eager declaration is so chilling.
Yeah, he doesn't smile back at all.
Not at all.
Oh.
He looks at the empty field and says, "The choice is obvious. But the action, that is an entirely different conversation." Yeah, the text establishes its central thesis right there. Intention is not merely different from action. Without action, intention is a completely detached, self-serving illusion.
That distinction really reframes how we look at our own unfulfilled goals. Like, intention is just the envelope.
Yes, exactly.
It isn't the seed, and it certainly isn't the act of planting it. And we see the consequences of confusing the envelope for the seed almost immediately in the story.
We really do.
So that evening, Samuel is fired up. He's determined to start. But the next morning, he wakes up a little later than planned. He looks outside, feels a bit sluggish, and tells himself, "You know what? Today is not a good day. Tomorrow, I will start with much more energy."
Tomorrow. Tomorrow is easily the most dangerous construct in the human mind.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's largely due to a psychological phenomenon known as temporal discounting. We view our future selves almost as entirely different people.
Literally a different person.
Right. The version of Samuel that exists in tomorrow is this idealized superhero who possesses infinite energy, flawless discipline, and perfect environmental conditions.
And if you're listening to this, you know exactly what tomorrow's version of you looks like.
Well, do.
Tomorrow's you never hits the snooze button. Tomorrow's you loves eating salads and, doing taxes early.
Oh, yeah. Tomorrow's me is incredibly productive.
But the tragic reality is that we never actually get to meet tomorrow's version of ourselves.
No, we don't.
We only ever have to operate as today's flawed, tired, imperfect version. And by offloading the burden of effort onto this imaginary future self, Samuel just completely absolves his present self of any responsibility whatsoever.
And because he keeps waiting for this idealized tomorrow to arrive, the motivation just completely dissipates.
It's gone.
Gone. Out of sheer boredom and laziness, Samuel eventually just tosses both seeds into the dirt. He doesn't dig a hole, he doesn't measure the distance, he throws them down, quote, just to see what happens, and then he completely abandons the fields once again.
Which forces us to confront the physical consequences of our inaction, right? Because ignoring a problem does not freeze it in time.
No, time keeps moving.
The ecosystem of Samuel's field continues to operate according to the laws of nature, entirely independent of his attention.
Which sets the stage for a pretty brutal awakening. Weeks later, Samuel wanders back to his field and is just stopped dead in his tracks.
It's a disaster.
A total disaster. The seed of procrastination has exploded. It hasn't just sprouted a few weeds, it has generated this dense, towering canopy of vegetation that covers nearly the entire plot of land.
Wow.
Its roots have spread aggressively, choking the soil, and tucked away in a corner, almost entirely invisible beneath this suffocating mass of weeds, is a frail, yellowish sprout.
The discipline seed.
Yes, the seed of discipline is actively dying.
It is such a stunning visual representation of entropy. Like in the physical universe, systems naturally move from order to disorder unless energy is applied to maintain them.
Exactly, thermodynamics.
Right. Procrastination doesn't just mean a neutral lack of progress. It represents active decay. The weeds consume the finite resources, the water, the soil nutrients, the sunlight that were desperately needed by that discipline sprout.
And this moment triggers what I think is the most profound part of the source material. Samuel falls to his knees in the dirt. He touches this frail, dying sprout, and the text notes that the immense weight of all his wasted time finally crushes him.
Yeah, that passage is my absolute favorite.
That's so powerful.
And it uses a very specific phrasing. It says the weight hit him, quote, not as guilt, as clarity.
Yes, guilt versus clarity.
Let me hazard a guess as to why there is such a sharp distinction here. Because guilt feels like an ego defense mechanism, right?
How so?
Well, it implies a moral failing, which keeps you trapped in your own feelings.
Yeah.
Guilt says, look how terrible I am, which is still ultimately a self-centered emotion. You're just focused on yourself.
That's a really good point.
But clarity is it's just math. It's objective cause and effect. Is that what the author is getting at?
That is a brilliant synthesis of the underlying psychology there. Guilt is paralyzing. When we wallow in guilt, we are inherently looking backward, obsessing over our past failures.
We get stuck.
We get completely stuck. It can actually be a secondary form of procrastination. We tell ourselves we are too busy feeling bad about our laziness to actually do any real work.
Right. It's heavy, but it doesn't pull a single weed.
Exactly. Clarity, however, is a completely different mechanism. Clarity removes the emotional self-flagellation and replaces it with cold, hard data.
Just the facts.
Just the facts. In that moment of clarity, Samuel realizes the universe is not punishing him. His dream isn't dying because he's inherently a bad person or because the gods are angry.
Right.
It's dying simply because he chose not to act, day after consecutive day. Clarity dictates that inaction breeds destruction. And once you possess that objective clarity, you can begin to dismantle the problem mechanically.
Because you finally understand how the machine works.
Precisely.
It shifts you from being a helpless victim of your own laziness to being the active architect of your own field.
I love that phrasing.
And right at the pinnacle of this breakthrough, the grandfather reappears. He just stands beside Samuel, looking at the disaster of a field in complete silence. But this time, Samuel speaks first. All he says is, I understand now.
And the grandfather deliberately allowed Samuel to experience the natural consequences of his choices without intervening.
He let him fail.
He did. And now that Samuel has arrived at that profound clarity, the grandfather provides an external historical framework. He wants Samuel to understand that this failure isn't unique to him.
It's universal.
It's a fundamental human condition. The struggle between discipline and procrastination has always been there.
He grounds Samuel's painful realization in ancient wisdom, offering this kind of historical blueprint for the mechanics of human effort. And for anyone listening, regardless of whether you view these specific texts as sacred theology or just ancient literature, the psychological framework they present is remarkably astute. The grandfather quotes two passages to illustrate his point.
First, he references a passage from Proverbs chapter 24.
Okay.
It vividly describes walking past the field of a lazy man and finding it covered entirely in weeds, with its stone wall broken down. It is an ancient empirical observation that nature abhors a vacuum.
Which isn't just ancient poetry, right? It's literally the second law of thermodynamics applied to human habits.
Exactly.
An abandoned house rots and collapses far faster than a house that is lived in. If you do not actively cultivate your mind or your skills or your physical field, thorns will inevitably colonize that empty space.
And then the grandfather pairs that observation with a principle from Galatians chapter 6.
What does that one say?
It says, whatever a man sows, that he will also reap.
Yeah.
And if we synthesize these two pieces of wisdom, the ultimate message of the text crystallizes.
Oh, what?
You do not harvest what you deeply wish for. You do not harvest what you elegantly talk about at social gatherings. You only harvest what you physically plant and cultivate every single day.
Wow.
The universe is entirely deaf to your internal desires. It only registers your external actions.
That hits hard.
Okay.
Which brings us to Samuel's recovery, and the text makes sure to emphasize how entirely unglamorous this process is.
Oh, it is brutal.
The next morning, Samuel doesn't wake up feeling magically transformed or like bursting with motivation. He just gets to work.
Finally.
Yeah. He starts pulling these massive, deeply rooted weeds with his bare hands. The description is really visceral. His hands bleed, his back spasms.
Yeah, it's not a fun montage.
No. It is grueling, miserable labor to undo the compounded damage of his own procrastination. But he doesn't stop. He returns the next day, and the day after that.
And crucially, alongside the painful extraction of the weeds, he must water that tiny, fragile sprout of discipline every single
It's
morning.
a little yellowish thing.
Yes. And he has to do this during a prolonged phase where the sprout shows absolutely no visible signs of growth or improvement.
It's basically the agricultural equivalent of compound interest, right?
That's a great analogy.
In the beginning, you are investing daily exhaustive effort. And when you check your progress, you are staring at a flat line.
Nothing's happening.
Exactly. You're fighting this overwhelming urge to quit because your brain is screaming, I'm sacrificing so much energy right now, and for what? Nothing is changing.
Right.
But those daily investments are quietly building a subterranean foundation. Eventually, that compound growth hits an inflection point and just explodes upward. But Samuel has to keep watering something almost invisible,
Yeah.
actively fighting his own inner voice that tells him the effort is pointless and, it's simply too late.
Well, and the inner voice is just a lingering echo of his former procrastination, right?
Right.
Trying to pull him back into a state of energy conservation.
No, that makes sense.
But because Samuel is now operating from a place of clarity rather than guilt, he can ignore it. He trusts the law of the harvest. He understands that if he consistently inputs the daily effort, the output must eventually follow, even if the timeline is delayed.
Wow.
This is the ultimate defining test of true discipline. The ability to execute an action without requiring any immediate validation.
The ability to execute without immediate validation, that is a profound standard. And for Samuel, that relentless execution finally pays off.
It does.
The narrative tells us that, painstakingly slowly, the sprout matured into a robust plant. The plant eventually grew into a massive tree, and that tree produced a harvest that Samuel could never have comprehended back when his field was empty.
It's a beautiful image.
But now the obvious question is, did he become the legendary, world-renowned farmer he used to brag about in the town square?
Right, the guy everyone comes to for advice.
Exactly.
Well, the text is beautifully grounded in its resolution here.
Mm.
No, he didn't instantly achieve that grandiose, ego-driven fantasy. He didn't become a billionaire of agriculture overnight.
Right. But he achieved something far more vital. The story concludes by stating that Samuel became the man who defeated himself.
The man who defeated himself. The author explicitly calls that the greatest harvest of all.
It really is.
And that completely reframes the entire purpose of setting a goal in the first place, doesn't it? The primary objective isn't just acquiring the fruit. The objective is conquering your own internal resistance to doing the work.
It completely demystifies our modern conception of discipline. We often conceptualize discipline as this rigid, flawless state of perfection where you never make a mistake and you always feel motivated.
Like a robot.
Exactly. But the text shatters that illusion. Discipline does not demand perfection. It doesn't ask you to be a superhero. It only asks you to show up today.
Just today.
Not tomorrow when conditions are ideal, but today amidst all the friction and the weeds. Because if you wait for tomorrow, the field is still sitting there. And every single day you wait, the weeds grow a fraction of an inch taller, their roots dig a fraction of an inch deeper, and bringing that field back to life requires exponentially more pain.
Absolutely.
So the ultimate challenge, drawn straight from the text, is a question you have to ask yourself right now. Which seed are you actually watering with your daily habits? And remember, you cannot water it with your eloquent words, and you cannot water it with your perfectly color-coded intentions.
No, you can't.
You can only water it with physical action.
It requires a brutally honest audit of your own life. You really have to ask yourself where you are substituting the cheap dopamine of talking about a goal for the necessary friction of actually pursuing it.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over, building on the underlying mechanics of these two very different seeds. We've established that the seed of discipline requires constant, exhausting, conscious effort to survive, but the grandfather made a point to note that the seed of procrastination grows completely on its own. It is utterly effortless, and it is ruthlessly aggressive.
It thrives exclusively on neglect.
So if procrastination and decay happen automatically the very second we stop applying intentional effort, what does that imply about human nature?
It's a scary thought.
Are our minds, our habits, and our lives naturally wired to default to chaos? If we aren't actively, consciously choosing to apply discipline every single day, are we simply surrendering our potential to an overgrown wasteland?
It's definitely something to think about.
Take a hard look at your own empty field. Are you still sitting in the shade waiting for the right moment, or are you finally ready to pick up a shovel?